Alcatraz Prison. Welcome to the Hidden Truth Stories channel. Today, we're diving deep into an unexplored historical mystery. The fog, that familiar, bone-chilling shroud of San Francisco, had always clung to Alcatraz Island asterisk like a jealous spirit, masking its grim reality, softening its hard edges, yet somehow amplifying its inherent mystery. We all know the federal penitentiary, the Rock, the escape attempts, the infamous inmates, Capone, Machine Gun Kelly. But what if the island's deepest secret lay not in the cells of the 20th century, but in stones far older, in a history systematically erased, hidden beneath tons of concrete and steel? This is the story of Elias Vance, a retired, eccentric structural engineer from Berkeley, whose lifelong obsession with stress tolerances and foundation settling led him not to a conventional structural failure, but to a historical one, a fissure in time itself, buried deep beneath the maximum security ward, a place the old guard simply called D Block. Elias wasn't looking for gold or buried treasure. He was looking for an anomaly, a persistent, minuscule asterisk seismic irregularity he detected from his homemade monitoring station, nestled high in the Berkeley Hills. An echo, he theorized, of something ancient vibrating just beneath the island's surface, a frequency utterly alien to the natural geological signature of the San Andreas fault system. His theory, laughed out of every academic and governmental office, was simple yet profound. Alcatraz, or Isla de los Alcatraces asterisk as the Spanish explorers named it, was not merely a military fortress and a prison. It was a prehistoric anchor point, a sacred nexus long utilized for purposes far removed from human incarceration, its very geology shaped by a forgotten truth. Elias, a man with the crinkled eyes of a perpetual seeker and the meticulous notebooks of a seasoned scientist, gained access to the island under the pretense of a comprehensive, independent structural review for the National Park Service, a task he undertook with the solemnity of a high priest entering a forbidden temple. His real work began in the dusty, echo-filled archives, where he pored over original architectural blueprints from the military citadel era. These documents predated the federal prison by decades, searching for discrepancies, for inconsistencies in the foundation reports, for any mention of structures demolished rather than repurposed. It was in a brittle, water-stained Spanish-era survey map, tucked away in a mislabeled box, that he found his first genuine clue. A cryptic hand-drawn symbol, resembling a stylized, five-pointed star within a crescent moon, marked precisely where asterisk D Block solitary confinement cells would later be constructed. Accompanying the symbol was a single word, scribbled in faint, looping script: El Reposo, the rest. Not a military term, not a penal term, but something deeply spiritual, profoundly unsettling. A subtle shiver of anticipation was now in the air. Elias' structural review took him into the deepest subterranean levels, into the damp, cold tunnels used for utilities and maintenance, tunnels even the most comprehensive public tour never reached. It was here, 2 levels beneath D Block, in a section sealed off since the 1930s due to unexplained flooding, that the anomalous seismic readings peaked. Using a ground-penetrating radar unit small enough to fit into a briefcase, Elias began his illicit, obsessive scanning, charting the rock's internal structure, looking for voids, for unnatural cavities in the bedrock. The radar, usually so precise, returned chaotic, nonsensical readings in a specific 40-foot radius beneath the foundations of the D Block corridor, a dense, metallic-like signature that defied the known composition of the island's asterisk Franciscan sandstone and chert. The rhythmic, steady work of the dedicated seeker was becoming strained, edging toward the reckless. It was as if the bedrock itself was being artificially shielded, or perhaps wasn't bedrock at all. One foggy afternoon, while the last of the daily ferry tour was pulling away, Elias, having feigned a minor injury, stayed behind, alone save for a skeleton crew of Park Service rangers in the main administration building miles away. Armed with a portable diamond-tipped coring drill, a piece of equipment he had cleverly included in his approved list for sample analysis, he returned to the sealed subterranean tunnel. The air was heavy, tasting of salt, rust, and something else, something metallic and ozone-sharp that prickled the back of his throat. He located the exact spot indicated by his radar, a seemingly unremarkable section of the tunnel floor where a century of mineral deposits had stained the concrete an oily black. For 5 arduous hours, the high-pitched whine of the drill cut through the island's silence, a sound quickly muffled by the dense rock and the ever-present fog. He broke through the concrete, then the older, hand-poured military foundation, and finally reached the source of the anomaly. It wasn't rock. It wasn't metal. The drill stopped with a soft, unsettling give, not a grind, and when Elias retrieved the core sample, his hands trembled. The core was not a cylinder of natural stone, but of a dark, crystalline substance, almost obsidian-like, yet shot through with faint, geometric filaments that glowed momentarily when exposed to his flashlight beam, a cold, pale azure. It was completely unknown to any geological index he'd ever consulted. The narrative had shifted from quiet investigation to tactile discovery, the unknown now material in his hand. He was looking at something artificial, something ancient, something that had been meticulously buried and then forgotten. He widened the hole cautiously with a small, specialized pneumatic hammer, working against the growing anxiety in his chest, the feeling of being watched by the heavy, oppressive silence of the empty prison above him. The crystalline layer was about 4 inches thick, and beneath it he discovered a cavity, a man-made chamber carved directly into the heart of the island. Dropping a small, powerful lead camera on a tether through the opening, Elias watched the feed on his monitor, his breath catching in his throat. The chamber was vast, far larger than any military bunker or cistern, its walls not rough-hewn stone, but perfectly smooth, polished to a mirror-like sheen, and covered in the faint, flowing script of a language he could not recognize, a language older than Latin, older than Sumerian, a language that seemed to mimic the swirling patterns of the deep ocean. In the center of the chamber, illuminated by the camera's harsh light, stood a single monolithic structure, a kind of altar or pedestal, crafted from the same dark, glowing crystal he had cored through. Resting upon it was an object, a sphere, roughly the size of a bowling ball, but rendered in a translucent, milky white material, perpetually emitting a low, internal thrumming sound that resonated even through the camera's microphone. The quiet contemplation of the engineer had been replaced by the profound awe of the archaeologist, facing a relic that defied time. As he watched, mesmerized, a sudden, blinding pulse of light emanated from the sphere, overloading the camera's sensor, plunging the screen into static. Simultaneously, a low, subsonic moan reverberated through the tunnel, rattling the tools on the floor and chilling Elias to the very marrow. He scrambled back, heart pounding, convinced he had awakened something vast and terrible beneath the legendary prison. This was not a prison foundation. It was a lock, a deep-time vault meant to contain something, and the symbol on the old Spanish map, El Reposo, asterisk, was a warning, a designation of an entity or a power that was meant to be at rest. The true, hidden history of Alcatraz began to coalesce in his mind. The island was a geographical anomaly known to ancient peoples, perhaps predating the Clovis culture, an energetic node in the Earth's magnetic field, And the sphere, this object of intense, focused power, was deliberately placed there to either harness or neutralize that energy. The packing quickened slightly, matching the surge of adrenaline and realization. The military fortress, the prison, the concrete, all layers of an elaborate, perhaps subconscious containment mechanism built over millennia to ensure whatever was inside stayed buried. Elias knew he couldn't simply walk away. He had to document, to understand the purpose of the sphere, the meaning of the script. Over the next 3 weeks, using the cover of his structural review, he returned to the chamber in secret, lowering himself into the void with ropes and a headlamp. The air inside was strangely static, utterly dry, and devoid of the coastal humidity. He spent hours tracing the alien script, attempting a crude phonetic transcription, discovering that the language was based not on human vocalizations but on complex resonant frequencies, a sort of musical notation for power. He recognized one repeated sequence of glyphs, a phrase that appeared again and again near the pedestal of the sphere, a warning or perhaps a description. His best terrifying translation, the glimpse of before, do not awaken the dreamer in the shell. The sphere, the shell, was not just an artifact. It was a vessel containing something living, or perhaps an awareness existing outside the conventional understanding of life, a dreamer whose awakening could fundamentally alter the world above. His research into the military records became frantic. He found references to strange, localized weather patterns, inexplicable electrical phenomena, and instances of severe psychological distress among guards and early inmates, all clustered around the D-Block area in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The rhythm now settled into a determined, almost obsessive, investigative pace. These were not the ramblings of madmen. They were side effects of the dreamer's subtle emanations, the restless stirring of the entity within the shell. The infamous D-Block, used for the most dangerous and mentally unstable inmates, was, by accidental design, the prison's pressure valve, the place where those already pushed to the brink were most susceptible to the subliminal influence of the ancient power. The true untold story wasn't an escape from the prison. It was the story of humanity building a prison asterisk over asterisk a prison, unknowingly sealing away a truth more profound and dangerous than any criminal mind. The plot thickened with the discovery of a final, critical document, a heavily redacted report from the Spanish colonial era, describing an expedition to the island by a Franciscan friar obsessed with pre-Columbian mysticism. The report spoke of the island's indigenous name, the Obsidian Heart, and documented a ritual performed by a small, secretive group of indigenous elders who knew of the chamber. Their purpose was not to worship the sphere, but to maintain the rest, to chant the harmonic frequencies that kept the entity dormant. The friar, misguided by zealous conviction, had tried to smash the sphere, believing it to be a demonic idol. The resulting seismic event, described in the report as a ground-shaking flash of silent blue light, was so intense that it was officially recorded as a minor, localized earthquake, an event that conveniently allowed the Spanish crown to seize the island under the pretense of fortifying the bay, thus beginning the long process of sealing away the truth. A note of regret and historical irony now colored the rhythm. One night, as Elias was meticulously photographing the script, the ambient thrumming of the sphere intensified, the milky translucence of the shell beginning to ripple with a faint, internal light, like plasma trapped beneath ice. The air in the chamber grew cold, impossibly cold, and a low, resonant note, a single deep \text A \text $0 note, echoed from the walls, a frequency that seemed to bypass his ears and vibrate the fluid in his inner ear. He felt a profound, alien presence, a thought not his own, a vast, hungry consciousness briefly brushing against his own, a glimpse of immense pre-cosmic loneliness. It was a terrifying momentary communion with the dreamer. The rhythm slows, adopting a deeply immersive, almost hypnotic quality, mirroring the dreamer's influence. He realized the entity wasn't malicious in the human sense, but simply existed on a scale so grand that its awakening would be catastrophic to the delicate balance of the world. The concrete, the steel, the sheer weight of the prison above, it was all, in a bizarre, unintended way, helping to dampen the effect, acting as a historical sound blanket, an anchor of modern civilization holding down the vestiges of an archaic, primal power. But the dreamer was stirring, and the aging structure of Alcatraz, the cracks in the walls, the persistent leaks, the foundational shifts Elias had initially studied, were not just structural failures. They were signs of the containment failing, the ancient, restless energy beginning to seep out, manifesting as unexplained phenomena and a palpable sense of historical unease that permeated the island. The rhythm now holds a deep, quiet tension, like a held breath before a significant action. The rising tension culminated on Elias' final night. He had found a small, recessed niche in the chamber wall containing a cache of ancient, stylized copper chimes, designed with the same flowing script. These, he theorized, were the instruments the indigenous elders used to perform the ritual of rest, their function to generate the precise harmonic damping frequencies needed to keep the dreamer dormant. The sphere, now radiating a steady, faint blue light, was thrumming rhythmically, and a faint, high-pitched asterisk whine began to emanate from the D-block corridor 2 levels above, a sound that the Park Service night guard would later dismiss as a faulty ventilation fan. Elias knew the window was closing. Using the precise measurements from the cryptic script, he carefully arranged the chimes around the pedestal, hanging them from small, almost invisible protrusions. He didn't know how to play the music of rest, but he understood the principles of resonance. He found a small, heavy piece of the crystalline material he had cored through earlier, and with a deep breath, tapped the largest chime. The resulting sound was not a simple ringing, but a complex, multi-layered chord that instantly silenced the humming of the sphere. The blue light dimmed. A palpable wave of stillness washed over the chamber, and the cold air retreated, replaced by a neutral, almost warm temperature. He repeated the sequence, tapping the chimes in a pattern suggested by the flow of the script he had transcribed. A deep, soothing drone began to fill the chamber, a sound that felt less like music and more like a lullaby woven from the very fabric of the earth, a sound that promised deeply and utterly peace. The narrative flow becomes smooth and measured, a gentle, rising swell of resolution. He was re-establishing the ancient anchor, singing the dreamer back to its slumber. He spent the rest of the night, a solitary, eccentric man in a subterranean chamber beneath a notorious prison, a forgotten conductor of an ancient, cosmic orchestra, carefully maintaining the harmonic rhythm until the first faint sounds of the morning ferry preparing for its first run began to drift down through the bedrock. When he finally climbed out, sealing the opening with a specially prepared patch of aged concrete, the sun was just beginning to burn off the fog, revealing the Golden Gate Bridge in a dazzling, fiery orange. The air on the surface felt lighter. The silence of the empty prison was truly silent, no longer weighted down by the palpable presence of the ancient entity. Elias Vance completed his final structural report, a masterful piece of obfuscation that pointed to non-existent foundation corrosion and recommended an immediate, extensive, and deep asterisk subterranean injection of specialized polymeric sealant, a completely unnecessary, costly procedure that, he knew, would only further stabilize the containment and keep anyone from digging deep into the D-block foundations for decades. He retired, his obsession fulfilled, the only human being in modern history to have touched the true heart of Alcatraz, to have quieted the whisper of the epic before. The story shifts to a reflective, calm denouement. The secrets of the island, the forgotten truths of the obsidian heart and the dreamer in the shell, were safe once more, sealed not just by steel and concrete, but by a delicate, ancient harmonic song, an unexplored history that now slept quietly beneath the most infamous prison in American lore, waiting for the day the music finally stops. The true prison was the one built by an archaic civilization, and the federal penitentiary was merely a serendipitous, effective, and completely unwitting lid on a secret far too vast for human comprehension. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you, and see you again.